The release of the Phala Phala report into the theft at President Cyril Ramaphosa's farm has left the country shocked and divided.
The Phala Phala farm theft has raised numerous concerns, not only among citizens but globally.
The report found that Ramaphosa has a case to answer after failing to report the theft of millions in foreign currency to the relevant authorities.
He has yet to answer where the money that was stolen, the money in US dollars on the farm, where exactly it came from.
An impeachment inquiry panel says the president may have broken anti-corruption laws and violated the constitution.
Parliament will on Tuesday debate the Section 89 panel report on whether President Cyril Ramaphosa should face impeachment.
We cannot be in a situation where we have a president that is facing essentially impeachable charges.
Well, I think it completely shatters now his platform of cleaning up and cleaning out.
He broke the law. If I had to keep that money in my house, I would be arrested.
It places him in a completely untenable situation, which is precisely why we've called for an early election. The people of South Africa must now decide where things go from here.
Good morning, Molweni, Abusheni, Dumelang. My name is Soli Malatsi. I'm the DA's national spokesperson. Today we are coming to you with a special broadcast outside of City Hall here in Cape Town, where members of Parliament will be convening to have a vote on the Section 89 independent panel report into President Ramaphosa's scandal. I'll be joined here by the DA Chief Whip, Siviwe Gwahube, and the DA Federal Leader, John Steenhuisen, to unpack the events that will happen today. We understand that there are many South Africans who are anxious about today's moment and what it means to them. And there's been many deliberate misinterpretations about whether today is a pronouncement of guilt or innocence on President Ramaphosa. But to get into the details of this, we are joined by the DA Chief Whip, Siviwe Gwahube. Hi, Siv.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to our viewers at home.
Thank you very much. There's been so much referencing about this Section 89 of the Constitution. Can you just give us a layman breakdown of what Section 89 tells us?
So Section 89 of the Constitution relates to the impeachment of a president. And so a couple of years ago, Parliament crafted rules that would show us as this institution how we would go about implementing Section 89 of the Constitution. And so you'll recall several months ago, the issue around the Phala Phala scandal came to light, and the whistleblower, as unreliable a whistleblower as he is, a whistleblower made some allegations, some very grave allegations against the president. And so it was at that point that DA leader John Steenhuisen wrote to the Speaker of Parliament to say it's important that we establish an ad hoc committee that would get into the detail of what has happened here. Because we know that it is not just the president who is likely culpable on this matter, that there's perhaps a network of people around him who may have known about the dollars that were stuffed on the couch, who may have covered up some of the covert operations that we know took place. There was also issues around the Presidential Protection Unit and the abuse of state resources. All of these things needed to be uncovered, and they needed answers. It is clear, regardless of where you stand on this matter, that the president has a lot to answer for. We have been imploring him in Parliament, asking him to answer the questions: what happened on his farm and why it's taken 2 years for this matter to come about. Now, Section 89, the process has come about. An independent panel was established of 3 members of the judiciary, 2 retired and 1 active member of the judiciary, that were nominated by parties in Parliament. They conducted their work for 30 days and it requested an extension. They came up with a report that now has said that they have reason to believe that the president has a case to answer for and that he may have broken sections of the Constitution. And we know that the Constitution says if a president breaks parts of his Constitution, i.e. the law, then he has automatically broken his oath of office. And so now today, this report is coming to this House. Members of Parliament will be voting on whether or not we must now establish an impeachment inquiry. It does not mean we're voting to impeach the president. All that it means is that we are voting to say that the process must continue. And an innocent president would be a president who would welcome the establishment of an inquiry so that we can get to the bottom of what has happened on his Phala Phala farm and actually clear his name, if indeed that is what he wishes to do.
I'm glad you've also clarified that part of what it takes to impeach a president for our viewers. But why was it so important that members of parliament are here in person to attend to this matter today?
Look, our view has always been that it is important that members of parliament get back to work. South Africa has been back to work post the pandemic. And yes, of course, we suffered the fire in parliament, but we've always been of the view that members of parliament must be present to do their work. It's not good enough to simply be on Zoom and not be engaged in the work of parliament. But our call was mostly around having a roll call as a voting mechanism. The reason for that is because we're of the view that the work that we do in parliament is the work of the people. And the people must be able to know how we are using this institution to represent them and how we are voting on matters of importance in this institution. And so we have said that members of parliament should individually say how they are voting on this matter, because we believe that when we saw what members of parliament did and members of the ANC did during the Nkandla debacle, where they voted to protect President Jacob Zuma, they're doing the exact same thing now under President Ramaphosa. And we want history to be the real judge of whether or not people have upheld their oath of office. And so that was our call. That's what we wanted, that, you know, vote with your chest. Stand, have the courage of your convictions. Let the people know how you have voted and why you have voted, so that the next time you go on a door-to-door and you go knock on their door asking if they vote, they can ask you, why did you vote to not have parliament do its work?
And talking about the roll call, what has been the Speaker's response in terms of the DS proposal for that roll call, and how will the vote actually take place so that we can have insight of what the proceedings will be like today in the House?
So she has since acceded to our request, although, you know, when we initially made the request, she declined it. And I think that she's been under tremendous amount of pressure. And we've been very clear. While some opposition parties have obviously called for a secret ballot, we've said, be open and honest about and be courageous about your vote today, because it's an important one. So she's since acceded to our request for a roll call. So how it will work is that each member of parliament will then be called and their name will be called, and they will state exactly how they're voting. And so our vote is not our secret as the DA caucus. We look forward to being able to state exactly how we are voting. We're voting for accountability. We're voting for Parliament to conduct its work. We're voting for this institution to be really restore its credibility, so that people know when we're here, we're not here to defend the politically aligned and the politically connected. We are here to do their work.
And in terms of the numbers, what would it take for this report to be adopted?
It would take some courageous members of the ANC to vote along with some opposition members who've decided that this is how they're voting. And once again, I mean, it is absolutely bizarre to me that the ANC has taken the stance. And I think there's been an over-sensationalization because of perhaps the presidential elective Congress that's coming up next week of this whole process. Because this is not about removing the president. This is about a report. We conduct and consider reports in Parliament all the time. We consider reports on oversight visits. We consider reports on committee work all the time. And so this is just another report that is being considered, but that has precedent-setting powers. And so it's absolutely disappointing, as I said earlier to a colleague, an ANC colleague of mine earlier, and I said, I really hope that the sense will prevail in your caucus and that you will actually disappoint people who think you will vote a particular way and actually decide to vote and be on the side of the Constitution rather than being on the side of narrow party political interests.
And on that aspect of narrow political interest, I mean, there's been a sense in some quarters of the media that this, you know, it's about politicians and political parties bickering instead of fighting for the pressing issues that face South Africans. What is your response to that?
Our view is simple. When Parliament works, South Africa works. So we have to start demonstrating here that it doesn't matter whether you're the president or any ordinary citizen of South Africa. You are equal before the law. And so upholding the rule of law is not secondary to fighting for issues around service delivery. It is just as important, because what are we if not people who are looking after what the Constitution says? The Constitution is there to protect all of us. And so my view is that this is a fight about accountability and the rule of law, an important fight to have. And that's why we've taken South Africans along with us to say, this is why we're voting the way that we are.
And just finally, we understand you're one of our speakers in the debate. Any insights into what your speech will be about?
Well, I'm going to be really making an impassioned plea to the people who still have a conscience within the ANC benches that let them rewrite the wrongs that they've made in the past. A lot of them voted to protect President Jacob Zuma. Let them not make the same mistake and protect President Ramaphosa from accountability again.
And that's it from our Chief Whip in terms of how the proceedings will unfold inside. Sif, thank you very much for your time and joining this special broadcast. And we will now be joined by the party leader, John Steenhuisen. John, welcome to this broadcast.
Thanks, Solly. Great to be with you and great to be with the viewers at home on this historic day.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to welcome you. John, we have heard a lot about the technical aspects of today's sitting and the votes. And last week you mentioned that this is a defining moment for our democracy. Why do you think it's such an important moment in our history?
Well, I think it's an important moment in our history, given where we have come from and given what is contained in the Zondo Commission reports. Because it's going to be the first litmus test about whether we've learnt anything from the findings of Zondo. Zondo's criticism and his reports, the most scathing parts of that were the parts that dealt with how Parliament abused its position to protect a president who had serious questions to answer. And it's going to be interesting today to see whether the ANC fall back into the same trap, whether they've learnt anything from Zondo, or whether it's going to be the same old protection squad, where it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter how scandalously you behave, no matter how much you steal, how much corruption you're involved in, there will be a protection squad around you. And that protection squad fails the Constitution, it fails the people of South Africa, and it fails our Parliament.
I mean, there's also been some concerns or observations by some media analysts that we are seeing the same tactics unfold that unfolded when the ANC caucus used Parliament to defend President Jacob Zuma. Is that the case here?
It's exactly the case again. And you can almost overlay the scandals on top of each other. In Phala Phala, money spent on a house, dollars stuffed into a couch, Jacob Zuma, Cyril Ramaphosa. And you can overlay it on that. And you can contort yourself into a pretzel, as some of the pro-Ramaphosa acolytes in the media are saying and trying to do. But the reality is that the president is repeating the same script. Stalingrad, legal defense, abuse of Parliament as a protection squad for the presidency rather than a protection squad for the people and the Constitution.
And on the president's conduct, I mean, what are your views about, first, the independent panel's report, and secondly, the president's decision to take it on review?
Yeah. Well, look, let me be clear. A report like any other report is going to have parts that we agree with and parts that we disagree with. But the reality is that that report remains just a report. It's not a finding of guilt. It's not a finding of innocence. It's not a recommendation for impeachment. All that report is saying is that given the information that exists currently, given what the president said, and given assessing the complainant's papers, we believe there are unanswered questions that need to be probed further by Parliament. That's all that report is saying. So those running around, saying the sky's going to fall in because the report's calling for the president's impeachment, it absolutely is not. It's just simply saying, hey, Parliament, we believe there's some issues here that you guys need to grapple with. Only you as Parliament and a committee of Parliament can do these things. It will also then widen the scope. Bear in mind the independent panel could not summon witnesses. They could not subpoena documents. A committee of Parliament will have all of those powers. So we can call the president. We can call Wally Roeder. We can subpoena the Reserve Bank. We can subpoena SARS. We can get them to release the money transfer coming into the country that ostensibly was filled out at SARS. And what that will do is enable Parliament to get to the bottom of what really happened at Phala Phala and then to make a decision. Is this an impeachable offence? I think the president's been hypersensitive by taking the report on review, particularly given the fact that he could have well used the parliamentary process to point out the issues where he thinks the report is wrong. And he would have been given ample opportunity to do so and taken us into his confidence about where he believes the report has gone wrong. So I think he's rushed off to the Concord in haste. I'll be interested to see whether they entertain it, given the fact that he hasn't exhausted all his internal remedies and there's no imminent harm. If Parliament adopts this report today, it's not saying the President must go. It's simply saying, Parliament, do your job now and establish whether there is grounds for impeachment or not.
Yeah. And on that angle, I mean, we know for sure that the DA has been really vocal about making sure that Parliament regains its bite as the center of accountability. And coming on the back of a president who came to power on promising, ethical leadership, isn't this contrast and irony of Ramaphosa's presidency?
Yes, and I think that he's missed a big trick here to differentiate himself from his predecessor right from the beginning on this thing. Remember the subterfuge that Jacob Zuma started at the beginning of Nkandla? I have a bond on the property. My bond paid for the improvements. And as the months went by, the awful truth started to come out. Here again, we have the president who is, refused to come clean with the South African public. And had he done so right from the beginning, maybe we wouldn't be standing here today facing this particular dilemma now in Parliament. Also, within Parliament, when asked questions, he simply deflected every single time. So, President Ramaphosa is not an innocent victim in all of this. He is largely responsible for the mess that he finds himself in and the fact that he has now compromised his ability to be able to be the leader that reforms, that cleans up, that gets things fixed in South Africa. Because any time now he tries to act against a corrupt individual within his own organization or in his government, they're going to turn around and say, but hang on, you yourself were compromised here. Why are you now trying to take action against me, but you feel you're beyond reproach? So I think he's missed an opportunity here, both with the coming clean, but then if you're innocent and you've got nothing to hide, subject yourself to the process and use the process to prove your innocence. Instead, he's running off to court to try and prevent the report from being dealt with. He's using the parliamentary ANC majority to try and head off any particular scrutiny. That is not the behavior of somebody who has nothing to hide.
And John, what insights can you share with the public and our viewers on parts of your speech in today's debate, as you'll be one of the two speakers?
Well, I'll be out doing today in a very unemotional way, making very, very clearly the case as to why Parliament must adopt this report. And that if we don't adopt this report and follow the process that we as parliamentarians set down, we adopted those rules, we drafted those rules, we voted for them to become the rules of Parliament. If we have got no faith in our own processes that we as MPs have adopted, well, what faith does it give the public out there in the processes of members of Parliament? And I think people need to be able to look at their members of Parliament and know that these are people that they can trust to do the right thing. And I'll be making the case about why we must follow the process today. And I know this, better than anything else, the truth always outs. And it's a lesson Richard Nixon learned, it's a lesson Jacob Zuma learned, it's a lesson many, many politicians have learned. The truth will ultimately come out. And you can try and put a lid on it as much as you like, but that truth will out. And the sooner that happens, the better it is. So we can then, as a country, decide whether and how we move forward with or without President Ramaphosa.
Yeah. There's been public sentiment that somehow holding President Ramaphosa accountable through this process will somehow lead South Africa into a chaotic state because of the state of the ruling party and perhaps those who are next in line in the event that he somehow gets impeached. What's your response to that?
Well, my response to that is simply this. You can't hold President Jacob Zuma to a standard and not hold President Ramaphosa to that same standard of scrutiny, of oversight. And yes, many people feel that he is the better of all the options there. But really, it's not our job, nor is it the public's job, to build a better ANC. Our job is to build a better South Africa. And if you have a president who has compromised himself, he must be held accountable. And it shouldn't matter whether it's President Zuma, President Ramaphosa, President Steenhuisen, President Kwarube, President Julius Malema, whoever it is, must be held accountable. And we must set that principle in place. That it doesn't matter if you're the darling of the media and you're everybody's favorite. There is a set of standards we expect from our public office bearers. And if you fail those set of standards, you will be held accountable by the institution of Parliament.
John, thanks very much for joining this broadcast, and thank you all for our viewers who joined us on our social media platforms. There is no doubt that today is an important day in the history of our constitutional democracy, but it's also about making sure, as the DA has consistently done, fighting for the right of Parliament to play its role in holding the executive to account. So please keep watching on our social media platforms. We will also be returning post the vote once it has happened in the House with a preview from our leader John Steenhuisen. Thank you very much, and keep tuned to all our social media platforms.
Thanks for watching. Like and follow our page on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell. Tell us what you think in the comment section. And please, like and share our videos with your friends and family. Join the DA. Join the fight to save South Africa.